here's something strange. The more a civilization opens itself to trade, ideas, and outsiders, the more it seems to need a wall. China traded along the Silk Road and built the Great Wall. The modern internet is the most open information system humans have ever built, and it's where the most sophisticated digital walls now exist. Openness and walls keep showing up together. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. Picture this. You're in charge of protecting a massive territory, thousands of miles of open land, and your job is simple to say, but almost impossible to do. Keep out the people and things that could destroy you, while letting in everything you actually need to survive. Because here's the catch. You can't just seal the border. You need trade. You need grain, horses, silk, information, allies. Cut all of that off, and your civilization starves and stagnates on its own. But leave the border wide open, and raiders, spies, and enemy armies walk right in along with the merchants. So which is it? Open or closed? The uncomfortable answer is neither. A fully sealed border fails. A fully open one fails too. What you actually need is something far harder to build. A way to let some things through and stop others, continuously, across thousands of miles, without a single person able to personally check every card, every traveler, every idea trying to cross. This is not just an ancient military riddle. It's a problem every large system eventually runs into, from empires to modern nations managing the flow of information across their own digital borders. And solving it required something more clever than a wall. So how do you actually filter a border thousands of miles long, without modern technology, without radios, without any way to see the whole line at once? China's answer, built over centuries and most famously expanded under the Ming Dynasty, wasn't a single wall at all. That's actually a common misunderstanding. The structure historians call the Great Wall was never one continuous barrier sealing the country off. According to research from scholars like Arthur Waldron, author of The Great Wall of China, From History to Myth, it was a patchwork of separate wall sections, earthen ramparts, natural cliffs, and river barriers, built at different times by different dynasties, later connected and reinforced into something closer to a system than a single object. And a system is exactly the right way to think about it. Because stone alone can't stop an army. What actually made the wall functional was everything built around it. First, there was detection. Watchtowers were placed at regular intervals along the wall, positioned so that guards could see the surrounding land and spot movement before it got close. Second, there was signaling. When a threat was spotted, guards lit fires or sent up smoke signals from tower to tower. This beacon relay system could pass a warning across huge distances far faster than any rider on horseback, giving troops further down the line time to prepare before an enemy ever arrived. Third, there was controlled access. The wall wasn't just about keeping people out. It had gates, guarded, regulated checkpoints where merchants, envoys, and travelers were allowed through, inspected, taxed, or turned away. Trade along routes like the Silk Road didn't stop because of the wall. It was funneled through it. And fourth, there was response. Garrison soldiers were stationed along the wall specifically so that once a threat was detected and signaled, there were people in position to actually act on that information. Put those four pieces together, and you get something much smarter than a barrier. You get a filtering machine. Sense the threat. Signal it fast. Let the legitimate traffic through a controlled gate. Respond with force where it's actually needed. The wall wasn't built to make China's border impossible to cross. It was built to make crossing it something China could see, sort, and respond to. That distinction matters because 2,000 years later, an entirely different civilization would face the exact same problem at a scale no ancient emperor could have imagined, and build a solution with a strikingly similar shape. Now take that same problem and change the terrain completely. Instead of a few thousand miles of land, the border is a network. Instead of merchants and armies, the traffic is data. And instead of thousands of border crossings a day, it's billions of requests every single second, flowing in from hundreds of millions of users. This is the challenge China faced with the rise of the internet, and its answer, widely nicknamed the Great Firewall, follows a structure that echoes the ancient wall almost piece for piece. Start with detection. Instead of watchtowers scanning open land, the modern system uses automated technical methods to scan traffic. One key method is deep packet inspection, where data passing through the network is examined for specific content, banned keywords, or connections to blocked services. Another is DNS filtering, which interferes with the system that translates web addresses into locations, effectively making certain sites unreachable. Researchers at groups like the Citizen Lab and the Openness Initiative have documented these mechanisms in detail over the years. Next, signaling. Where ancient beacon towers passed warnings from post to post, modern filtering systems operate through centralized and automated infrastructure. When traffic is flagged, whether by keyword, by IP address, or by domain, that flag can trigger a block almost instantly, applied consistently across the network without needing a human in the loop for every single decision. Then, controlled access points. This is one of the most direct parallels. China does not have countless unmonitored connections to the global internet. International internet traffic is required to pass through a small number of licensed gateways. This mirrors the gates in the ancient wall almost exactly, a small number of controlled crossing points, rather than an open, unmonitored border through which all traffic must pass to be inspected. And finally, response. Just as garrison troops acted once a threat was flagged, the modern system pairs automated blocking with human oversight, including content review teams and legal enforcement, for cases that require judgment beyond what automation alone can decide. Detection, signaling, controlled gates, response. The exact same four functions the ancient wall relied on, rebuilt out of routers, filters, and licensed gateways instead of stone, watchtowers, and soldiers. This isn't a poetic coincidence. It's what happens when two different civilizations, separated by 2,000 years, run into the same underlying problem. How do you manage a massive, continuous flow of traffic across a border, letting some of it through and blocking the rest, without being able to personally inspect every single thing trying to cross? Once you see that structure clearly in both systems, the real question becomes what it actually reveals about how any large system is forced to solve this problem. Strip away the stone and strip away the code, and both of these systems reduce to the same 5 working parts. First, sensing. Some mechanism has to notice that something is approaching the border in the first place, whether that's a watchtower guard scanning open land or an automated system scanning data packets. Second, classification. Once something is detected, it has to be sorted. Is this a threat, a neutral traveler, or legitimate trade? An ancient guard had to judge an approaching group by sight. A modern filter judges traffic by keyword, address, or pattern. Third, signaling. That classification has to be communicated somewhere else in the system, fast enough to matter. Beacon fires did this in minutes across mountain ranges. Automated flags do it in milliseconds across a network. Fourth, controlled passage. Neither system tried to stop everything. Both built specific, limited crossing points, gates in one case, licensed gateways in the other, where legitimate traffic could pass through after inspection. Fifth, response. Detection and classification mean nothing without someone or something positioned to act on them. Garrison soldiers in one era, automated blocks and human review teams in the other. That 5-part structure is where the real similarities live, and they go deeper than both built a wall. Both systems accepted, from the start, that total closure was never the goal. Openness was necessary for survival. What both civilizations actually built was a way to make openness survivable, by making the border legible instead of sealed. Both relied on distributed sensing spread across the entire length of the border, rather than one single checkpoint trying to catch everything. And both used tiered response, meaning small, local issues got handled locally, while larger threats triggered escalation up the chain. But the differences are just as important, and forcing a clean symmetry here would be dishonest to the history. The most obvious difference is speed. A smuggler's cart moving contraband past a checkpoint might take days to reach its destination, giving defenders time to respond. A blocked website can be rerouted through a new server or a new method in seconds. The tempo of the entire contest changes when the adversary can move at the speed of software instead of the speed of a horse. Geography is another difference. A wall is fixed. It sits on specific land, and once built, moving it is a massive undertaking. A digital filtering system is not tied to physical space in the same way. Rules can be rewritten, new domains can be blocked, and new methods can be deployed in an update, not a construction project. And visibility is different too. The Great Wall was, among other things, a visible statement of state power, something built partly to be seen by China's own people and by outsiders. The Great Firewall works largely by being invisible to most users inside it, filtering traffic without most people ever seeing the mechanism at work. These differences matter because they point to something bigger than this one comparison. This same five-part structure, sensing, classification, signaling, controlled passage, and response, doesn't just show up in border walls and internet filters. Biologists describe the human immune system in almost identical terms, distinguishing harmless substances from genuine threats, signaling that distinction to the rest of the body, and mounting a response calibrated to the danger. Airport security systems, financial fraud detection, and even editorial review at a newspaper all follow some version of the same shape. This is not one culture copying another across time. It's what happens when any complex system has to survive contact with an environment it cannot fully control. Given enough time and enough at stake, unrelated systems tend to converge on the same basic architecture because the underlying problem, sorting a continuous, high-volume flow into what's safe to let through and what isn't, doesn't change. Which brings the wall and the firewall to the same real conclusion. Neither one succeeded or failed based on how solid or how strict it was. The Great Wall didn't stop every invasion it was built to prevent, and no filtering system, ancient or modern, catches everything trying to get through. What actually determines whether a system like this works is the quality of its sensing, the accuracy of its classification, and how well its response keeps pace with whatever is trying to cross. Height and strictness were never really the point. Judgment, applied consistently across a massive scale, was. So maybe the real question was never wall or no wall. It's a question every system, a country, a company, even a single person, has to keep answering. What are you letting through, and what are you filtering out? Where in your own life are you running an open border when you actually need a checkpoint? Let me know in the comments.